The Orioles' main focus is clearly pitching this offseason, but that does not just stop with starting pitching. I think they're interested in some relievers as well. So let's take a look at some right-handed relief pitchers who the Orioles could go after this winter. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Wednesday, December 4th, 2024, and welcome back into the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we're going to continue with our Orioles free agent wish list series this offseason. I've done the wish list for backup catchers, have done it for right-handed hitting outfielders, and I've done it for starting pitchers, both one episode for righties and one episode for lefties. And today, we're going to move into the bullpen because honestly, the Orioles bullpen has been solid to good the past few years, but they have lost a couple of big names. Jacob Webb was non-tendered. Danny Coulombe had his option declined. So there seems to be, as you kind of boil it down, at least one opening currently in the Oriole bullpen. And there, as always, are a lot of interesting relievers available in free agency. So I'm going to take today to look at just the right-handed relievers, give you my free agent wish list for the Orioles, but do it in a little bit of a different way. And that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by FanDuel. You can start the season with a big return on FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Just visit FanDuel.com to get started today. So the way we've done these wish lists so far this offseason, make sure to check them out. The most recent one was on Monday, talked about right-handed starting pitchers, kind of my top 6 on my wish list. That's how we've usually done it. Top 6 guys that are out there. For relievers, it's very, very different because not only are there more relievers available than any other position, so there's just so many more names to consider, and a list of 16 seems a little too short. The other thing is all the relievers play such different roles. Like if you're looking for a right-handed hitting outfielder like we did earlier in the offseason for a wish list, that's a pretty secure role. For a reliever, this could be a free agent closer. This could be a setup guy. This could be a middle reliever. This could be someone who's established. This could be kind of an unknown under the radar kind of guy. So I decided to cut the relievers into 3 categories and do a top 3 wish list for each category. So my 3 categories are the closers. These are guys who, I'm not saying the Orioles need a closer because Felix Bautista should be fully healthy, ready to go for opening day 2025. But these are guys who have been closers, could be good setup men, could spell Felix Bautista as the Orioles kind of still ease him back into his first season back from Tommy John surgery, and will still help your bullpen and have been 9th inning guys in the past. Then we'll do the good setup men you know. That's a list of guys who have been closers before, but they've been mostly 7th and 8th inning guys over their careers, but they are veterans. They're a little bit older, and I'm willing to bet you know their names because they've all played big roles really in postseasons, especially in the past couple of years. And then the final group will be the under-the-radar guys who could break out. 3 names who have all pitched in the big leagues for the past few seasons and are now free agents, but could take another step forward as cheap options for the Orioles. So let's start with the closers, the big names, the guys who get the 9th inning. Now, if these guys come to Baltimore, they are certainly not going to be promised the 9th inning, and they probably know, hey, they are not going to be option A as a closer. But it's better than nothing. They'll know that Felix Bautista can't close every game, and the Orioles have already said they're going to ease Bautista in probably April and maybe longer. And what I think that means is Felix Bautista probably won't pitch on back-to-back nights in any of April. So if Felix gets a save on April 19th, just picking up a random date, there'll probably be an off day if I go and look at the calendar on that one. And then on April 20th, there's another save situation. It's not going to go to Bautista. It'll probably go to the next man up as the O's just try to ease him back into the season coming off Tommy John surgery. So there will be some save opportunities if a guy really likes the 9th inning. But these 3 names have also not been married to the 9th their entire career. They are not Craig Kimbrells, guys who have always been closers. They've bounced around roles, and I think would be more open to a little bit of a lesser role with the Orioles. Number 3 on my wish list for the closers is Jordan Romano. Jordan Romano, a 31-year-old right-hander who will be 32 in April, who has spent his entire big league career with the Toronto Blue Jays. Now, throughout these wish lists, I use the free agent matrix that is put together by John Becker of FanGraphs. It is a fantastic free resource and spreadsheet that basically averages out every free agent projection and spits out a prediction based on those for that free agent this offseason. Plus, it has way more information about coaching hirings, minor league signings. It is the one-stop shop for off-season movement in Major League Baseball. Definitely check it out. Now, he doesn't have Jordan Romano on there. Some of that is because he was non-tendered. So Jordan Romano was supposed to be a free agent after next year. He was supposed to hit free agency after 2025, but that didn't quite happen because he struggled with some injuries this year. And the Blue Jays, instead of paying him what would have been about $8 million in arbitration for next year, just cut him loose. They non-tendered him and entered him into the free agent pool. Most likely, he'll be getting a 1-year, $8 to $10 million deal, kind of a prove-it deal to make sure he is healthy. That would be my guess on Jordan Romano. But he only pitched 13 2/3 innings this year, and he last pitched on May 29th for the Blue Jays. He underwent arthroscopic surgery to fix an elbow impingement, got that surgery in July. He was initially scheduled to come back in September, but the Blue Jays were so out of it, they didn't want to rush him back, risk re-injury, so they just shut him down for the rest of the year. What it sounds like is if the Blue Jays were in the playoff race, he would have returned at some point in September, which is good news for the current status of his injury. Makes you assume, and we haven't gotten a recent update, but makes you assume that, hey, he should be, at least on the surface, good to go for 2025. But clearly the Blue Jays still had questions about it because they were willing to non-tender a guy who has been an all-star. From 2020 to 2023 for 4 seasons with the Blue Jays, he was one of the best closers in baseball. Orioles fans know him well. Now, he did blow a couple of saves to the Orioles, but in general, he had been great in his career. About 200 innings over those 4 seasons, a 2.29 ERA, 31% strikeout rate, 9% walk rate, a 132 stuff. Plus, he's been great. He was an all-star in both 2022 and 2023, truly one of the best closers in baseball. But again, he only throws 13 innings this year. He has a 6.59 ERA in those 13 2/3 innings he threw this year. He did pick up 8 saves, but it really was not pretty. And there was an injury. They put on the IL and he never really returned. Now, if he's healthy, it's fastball 97, slider 97. He's really a 2-pitch guy. The fastball's got good ride. It's tons of swing and miss. It's insane stuff. And it could be a fairly buy low candidate. Because let me tell you, if Romano's healthy, he's could be a top 10 reliever in baseball. And you could get him for 1 year, $8 to $10 million. You could get him for the price, maybe less than you paid for Craig Kimbrell, and get a much better pitcher if he is healthy. But he's number 3 on this list because we just don't know. When you get an elbow injury, you get a procedure, but it's not Tommy John. You don't pitch again over the year. You get non-tendered. There's definitely some questions there. Number 2 on my list, speaking of injury questions, is Kirby Yates. He's 37 years old, and he will be 38 in March. Yes, he is getting up there, but what a season he just came off of with the Rangers in 2024. The free agent matrix predicts a 1-year, $12 million deal for Kirby Yates this offseason. When I say what a season, I mean what a season it was for Kirby Yates, who basically resurrected his career, becoming the closer for the Texas Rangers last season. He had Tommy John surgery that basically knocked him out for 3 seasons, cost him most of 2020, 2021, and 2022. He hadn't pitched for a while, and this was a guy in Kirby Yates who was one of the best relievers in baseball before that. In 2018 and 19 with the Padres, he had a 2-year span where he had a good argument for being the number 1 relief pitcher in the majors. Then he gets Tommy John, and you just don't see him for a while. He comes back with Atlanta in 2023, and he was fine in 60 innings. He was a solid middle relief guy. But the Rangers sign him, and he was back. Makes his second All-Star team last year, a 35.9% strikeout rate for Kirby Yates in 61 2/3 innings with the Rangers. Highest K rate of any available free agent right-handed reliever this offseason. That's how good he was. Now, it was an 11.8% walk rate, so there's a little bit of walk issue in there. But man, oh man, is that strikeout rate insane. As I mentioned, 61 2/3 innings. He had a 1.17 ERA this year. Let me say it again. 1.17. Now, he got a little lucky. The BABIP at 168. Home run to fly ball rate under 6%. Like, he's due to regress. His FIP was 2.50, xFIP 3.12. He should have had a little bit of a higher ERA, and he had some luck baked in there. But generally, when you post a 1.17 ERA, there is going to be some luck in there. And the stuff's not insane stuff plus-wise, so he's going to regress a little bit, but he still had the lowest expected ERA and the lowest expected batting average against him in Major League Baseball this year. He's got a 93-mile-per-hour fastball with just insane carry and ride. It was ranked as one of the best pitches in baseball by Baseball Savant, and it's just a disgusting splitter. It falls off the table, makes him better against lefties than he is against righties, despite being a right-handed pitcher. Now, he's got injury questions still coming off the Tommy John, although he looked healthy the last 2 years. And yeah, he's 38 years old, so that's a question too. But man, oh man, was he dicing guys up. And for 1 year, $12 million, not a big commitment. If he's anything close to what he was last year, that's a really good veteran to have in your bullpen. And number one on the wish list part of the closers is Clay Holmes. We know Clay Holmes well. He's 31. He'll be 32 years old in March. Spent 2024 with the Yankees, and the Matrix projects him to get a little bit more. They project a 3-year, $30 million deal for Clay Holmes this offseason. Now, first of all, with Clay Holmes, you got to start with the ground ball rate. At 65%, it was the highest ground ball rate for any pitcher in baseball this year. Nobody was keeping the ball on the ground more than Clay Holmes. Now, unfortunately for him, when the ball was hit in the air, he had a bit of a home run issue. Now, some of that was pitching at Yankee Stadium, one of the best home run ballparks for hitters in baseball. Some of it was some ill-timed command and stuff issues that he went through in the middle part of the season. And that was when he did lose the Yankees closer job. Overall for Holmes this year, 63 innings, a 3.14 ERA with a 3.02 FIP on the season, 25% strikeout rate, 8% walk rate, and the big ground ball rate. But down the stretch, he lost his closer job to Luke Weaver, and that continued throughout the playoffs and the Yankees' run to the World Series, is that Holmes was like, July and August, he was struggling, and Luke Weaver took over and was amazing. But the good part is that Holmes recovered, and he did pitch fairly well, is still a solid middle reliever and setup man for the Yankees. Like, they didn't take him out of the equation. They just backed off of his role a little bit. And listen, he was bad in September. That's really when he lost that closer role. But the Yankees still trusted him in October and did give up a walk-off home run and a couple of runs. But generally, he was good. And here's the thing, like, when he moved out of the closer role, he got better with a little bit of that Yankee pressure off of him. That's what the Orioles would be asking him to do, is to be a setup man who closes a little bit when Felix isn't out there. Like, they're not asking him to be the ninth inning guy every single night. And I think that is a role that Clay Holmes is much better suited for. Now, he's been a closer for 3 years for the Yankees and was amazing in 22 and 23 and was honestly great for the Yankees when he came over from the Pirates in the trade in 2021, kind of before he got the closer role. But I just think his stuff, he's very similar to Yennier Cano in that he can be one of the most dominant relievers and one of the best relievers in baseball. But he's more suited to be a setup man than a closer, because in your closer, you want a guy who's consistently missing bats. And what guys like Holmes and Cano do is they're ground ball guys. They pitch to soft contact. They get a ground ball to short. They get double plays. That's how they get out of jams. That's how they get outs. But that can hurt you more in the ninth inning when there's more traffic. That can also hurt you in extra inning scenarios when a runner is already on second base. You want more of a bat misser as your closer. It seems like Holmes is just better fit to be a setup man, and maybe the Orioles can do that. His sinker got hit this year. That was his issue. Like, opponents hit 317 against that nasty high 90s sinker. But the Orioles have fixed Yennier Cano's sinker when it was struggling. They fixed Cionel Perez's sinker when it was struggling. They can do it with Clay Holmes as well. And he backs up that sinker with better secondary stuff than Cano or Perez have. I mean, his slider and sweeper combination, they are tremendous. Those pitches are incredible. And he kind of went to those for a while this year when the sinker was really struggling to get him back on track. He's just got better stuff than those two guys, and I think would be a really good addition to the bullpen. Now, there are rumors that teams are considering signing him as a starting pitcher and turning him into a starter. And honestly, if he just adds like a changeup, he's probably a solid, maybe at best middle of the rotation starter. And I wouldn't be opposed to the Orioles trying that as well. It worked for some teams with some guys in 2024, and it will probably continue. But whether it is starter or reliever, I get that he had some bad moments with the Yankees, but I really do think he could help out the Orioles. And wouldn't it be sweet to see Clay Holmes on the O's getting big outs against the Yankees with the Yankee fans just not knowing what to do about it. Remember when Aaron Hicks went back and homered in Yankee Stadium in 2023? It would be that, but with a guy with a little more sustained success in Clay Holmes. But those are the closer types that I would like to see the Orioles bring in. Next are some more veterans we're going to talk about, but not necessarily ninth inning guys lately. They've been more setup men, but they've still been great and could still help the Orioles. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. So we will move on to my second group of relievers on this right-handed reliever wish list episode. My second group is the good setup men you know. All of these guys are 35 or older. All of these guys have been in the big leagues for a while. And all of these guys have been really, really good over the past few seasons, and especially in 2024. And I think despite their advanced age, baseball-wise, have a lot to give still in big league bullpens. And number 3 on the wish list for the good setup men you know is Tommy Kahnle, 35-year-old right-hander who spent 2024 with the Yankees. The free agent matrix predicts a 2-year, $13 million deal for Kahnle in free agency this year. Now, if you know Tommy Kahnle, it's because, well, he pitched to the World Series out of the Yankee bullpen this year. It's because he's been with the Yankees for a while. So even while he went through some injuries and missed a year and change, he's been with the Yankees for a little bit, like the Orioles have faced him a good amount. But it's also because he became a little famous for how many changeups he was throwing in this postseason. Now, it's a normal thing for Tommy Kahnle, who threw 73% changeups in the regular season. He's got a four-seamer, he's got a slider, he's got a sinker, but it was 73% changeups this year. And if you're watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page, you can see this chart here. This is via StatCast and Baseball Savant. This is Tommy Kahnle and the changeup usage leaders in Major League Baseball this year. Nabil Krismat, who didn't pitch that much for the Dodgers, was second at 70%. Then there was Kyle Hurt, again, didn't pitch much for the Dodgers at 54%. The next guy who actually pitched a good amount in the major leagues this year, Trevor Richards, threw his changeup 54% of the time. He was basically number 2 behind Kahnle, who was at 73%. And Richards is known for just loving to throw his changeup. And that's how far ahead Tommy Kahnle was. And you can see, if you're looking at the run value of the pitches, it's kind of a StatCast metric that shows how good that pitch was overall. Like all these guys who threw these changeups, they were pretty average. Like the best one on this list is Devin Williams with a 4 run value. Tommy Kahnle had a 10 run value on his changeup. So not only was he throwing it a lot, but it was marked as a close to elite pitch this year as well. And that's kind of what allowed him to throw it 73% of the time, is that if you have a pitch that's that good, you can get away with 3/4 usage. Now, for Tommy Kahnle, maybe he went a little too far in the playoffs. He threw 61 consecutive changeups over multiple outings in the postseason for the Yankees. That's right, 61 straight Tommy Kahnle pitches were changeups. And there was really only like one outing where he got hit during that entire time, and that was in the World Series. Like everything else, he was getting guys out throwing only changeups. Now, he varied with the delivery and the speed of them a little bit to make them look like a little bit different pitches, but it was 61 straight changeups. That's how good that pitch is. Opponents hit 157, 38% whiff rate. He's got a 58% ground ball rate overall. Like that's really, really good stuff with those pitches. But the issue is there's been plenty of injuries. Had Tommy John surgery, then forearm issues, then bicep issues, then shoulder issues. Basically washed out almost 4 years of Tommy Kahnle's career. He threw 1 big league inning in 2020, missed all of 21, 12 innings in 2022, and then he did come back to throw 40 innings in 2023 and was pretty good for the Yankees. So really it was more of like 3 and change years that were knocked out. But then he fully returned this year, 42 and 2/3 innings over 50 games this season, had a 2.11 ERA out of that Yankee bullpen. Now, the FIP was 4.01, so that concerns you a little bit. And it was a 26% strikeout rate, 11% walk rate was a little bit high. And yeah, he also started this season on the injured list with shoulder inflammation. So that's something to think about, but he came back and was healthy for the rest of the year. I just think a guy who can throw 73% changeups, throw 61 of them in a row and be that good is pretty comfortable with his stuff and with himself at this point in his career. And yes, the injuries and the age of 35 is a little bit concerning, but if you can get him for 2 years, 10 million-ish, like, he'll be a really solid middle relief guy who gets righties and lefties out in your bullpen. Number 2 on my wish list for those good setup men that you know well is Blake Treinen, another guy who we saw pitch big innings in the World Series this year. 36-year-old righty who spent 2024 with the Dodgers. The free agent matrix predicts a 2-year, $17 million free agent contract for Blake Treinen this offseason. Now, just like Tommy Kahnle, he was battling injuries before this season. Shoulder surgery for Treinen wiped out basically most of 2022 and 23. I mean, he threw 5 innings in 22, didn't throw in 2023, and then returned this season. He started this year on the IL, but for a non-shoulder thing, it wasn't an arm thing. And then when he came back out there for the Dodgers this year, it was like he had never left. Back in 2021 with LA, before the shoulder surgery, 72 and a third innings, 1.99 ERA. He was one of the best relievers in baseball. He returned this year after 3 years battling the shoulder issues, and it was like nothing had changed. 46 and 2/3 innings, 1.93 ERA for Blake Treinen for the Dodgers this year. It was a 30% strikeout rate, just a 6% walk rate. I mean, those are absurd numbers right there. He was basically the same dominant pitcher. Heavy sweeper usage, number 1 pitch, 39% usage on that pitch. You can see this chart right here if you're watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, also from StatCast and Baseball Savant. Run value for sweepers this year, only Anthony Bender of the Marlins and Porter Hodge of the Cubs, both who had pretty good relief seasons this year, kind of under the radar, had better sweepers than Blake Treinen in 2024. It was one of the best sweeping sliders in all of baseball this season. It was nasty. And it's funny because Treinen before the injury had a good sweeper, but earlier in his career, he was known as the guy with the crazy sinker who would get these like insanely high ground ball rates, 60+% earlier in his career. And then he kind of changed who he was, and he had a career low 45% ground ball rate this year, but that's because he got more strikeouts. He really wasn't walking anybody at all, and opponents were hitting just 140 with a 49% swing and miss rate against that sweeper, one of the best pitchers in baseball that he could rely on. Now, his velocity was a little down. He was 97 before shoulder surgery. He was more 95 this year, but the 95 still played with that sweeper being really, really good. And I just think it all combines to be, hey, if he's healthy and wants to continue pitching, like he was awesome down the stretch. He was incredible. He was, I would call him the Dodgers' best reliever this postseason. Like that is somebody who you want in your bullpen. Now there are some questions about Blake Treinen and not just injury, but some off the field stuff. But just in terms of, don't go through things with Blake Treinen and what he has posted on the internet. But he's got legitimate stuff and could really help this O's bullpen. But number 1 on my list of the setup guys is a guy I've been clamoring for the Orioles to get for like 3 years now. And this is a guy we know really, really well in Baltimore, and that is David Robertson. You're thinking, Connor, David Robertson? Didn't David Robertson give up the home runs on the Cal statue game in 2012? And the answer is yes. When he was the Yankees setup man in 2012, he gave up the home runs to Adam Jones and Mark Reynolds in the crazy 8th inning of the Cal statue game when the Orioles hit 3 homers and won that insane game at Oriole Park. 12 years later, he's arguably better as a reliever. It has been an unbelievable career for David Robertson. He is 39 years old, but he turns 40 on April 9th. Next year will be his age 40 season. And I have no problem thinking he'll be just as good next year. Among all of the free agent right-handed relievers that are available this offseason, there's tons of them. He's 3rd in FIP, 3rd in XFIP, and 7th in Stuff Plus. So it's not just that smoke and mirrors are getting him a low ERA. And listen, he had a 3.00 ERA in 72 innings with the Rangers this year. But it's not smoke and mirrors. his 2.65 FIP, he got a little unlucky this year. Like the stuff under the hood is still elite. And, the Matrix predicts a 1 year, $12 million deal for David Robertson. I will not stop until either he retires or the Orioles finally sign him. And at this point, he's mostly cutter and curveball. Cutter 63% of the time, curveball 27%. Like it's the same nasty cutter it used to be with the Yankees. It's 93 miles an hour. It's got good movement. Guys just cannot square it up. If you're watching on the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel, you can see here the run value for all pitches. This is not just cutters. This is all pitches in Major League Baseball this year. Yeah, that's David Robertson, tied for 6th with 19 run value on his cutter. Tied with the Dylan Cease slider, Ronaldo Lopez fastball, Tarek Skubal fastball, and Ronel Blanco slider is the Robertson cutter. Tied for 6th, is the 3rd best cutter in baseball this year, behind Emmanuel Clase, best reliever in the league, who finished 3rd in the Cy Young, and a guy we know pretty well named Corbin Burns. So the only 2 guys who had better cutters than 39-year-old David Robertson this year. That's kind of absurd what he was able to do at age 39. He's still throwing hard. He's still getting guys out. Why can't he do it? 33% strikeout rate. David Robertson at 39 had his highest K rate since 2017, and a 9% walk rate's a little high, but it was as low as since 2021. Like, what is this guy doing? What's happening here at age 39 that he is still this good? He learned that cutter from Mariano Rivera, and it's stuck with him, and it has elongated his career. 163 batting average, 209 slugging against that cutter. Statistically, it's the best his cutter has ever been, and it's a pitch he's basically been throwing since like 2009 with the Yankees. He came up in 2008. This guy won a World Series. Let me say this again. He was on the Yankee team that won its last World Series, and he is still one of the best relievers in baseball. The leadership he can bring, the veteran experience, the stuff he has, put him in that Oriole bullpen. I mean, 48% ground ball rate, 5% barrel rate. Like, the only thing that concerns you is that he's 40. If he was 32, this guy might be getting 4 years, $50, $60 million. I mean, he's thrown 63 or more innings in each of the last 3 seasons. He doesn't get hurt even at his late 30s. Like, I get that it's a risk to sign a guy who's going to be 40 years old in your bullpen, but when has he shown he's slowing down? Bring David Robertson on in. He knows the AL East. Get him in here. Let's put him in the 7th and 8th inning because he is nasty when he is out there. But those 6 names are really the guys that I expect you to know a little bit of something about before I talked about them. Hopefully you learned a little bit more about them. But to finish off the podcast, I want to talk about the under-the-radar guys. 3 guys who are not getting as much publicity, but who are free agents and could pop with some little tweaks with the O's next season. So we're into our final category of our right-handed reliever free agent wish list for the Orioles. These are the under-the-radar guys who could break out. Now, you may know these names for some reasons. You may not, but I'll tell you about my top 3 on this list. Number 3 on this list for me is Joe Ross, 31-year-old right-hander who spent 2024 with the Brewers, and the Matrix predicts just a 1-year, $4 million deal for Ross in free agency. Fairly cheap for what he could give you. Now, before 2024, we had not seen Joe Ross on a mound in a while. Basically, you had not seen him since the 2019 World Series with the Nationals. When he was in the Nats rotation for most of the year. He was their number 5 starter in 2019. Then in the postseason, you only need 4 starters, so they moved him to the bullpen. And he was basically the long man in the Nats bullpen for that World Series run. He didn't do a lot out of the pen. He pitched a little bit. But when Max Scherzer woke up with a sore neck in, what was it, Game 6 of the World Series, Game 5 or 6 that year, it was Joe Ross who they turned to pitch in that game. And he was solid enough to help the Nationals eventually win that World Series. But then we didn't see him for a little bit. Like, he opted out of the 2020 season. He did make 19 starts to a 4.17 ERA in 2021. And then he got hurt. Tommy John surgery kept him out for basically all of 22 and 2023. He also, from late May to late July, missed 2 months with a lower back strain this year with the Brewers as well. So there are certainly injury issues with Joe Ross. But the Brewers signed him because they were just signing any pitching. They traded Corbin Burns. Brandon Woodruff was hurt. They were like, we have Freddie Peralta and, I don't know, me, you, my wife, and my dog. That was basically the Brewers rotation last year. So they signed Joe Ross because they were like, well, he's cheap. Maybe he'll pitch some innings for us. And he threw 9 starts, and he had a 4.50 ERA. He was fine. Went on the IL with the back strain. Came back on July 30th, made a start, gave up 5 runs in 5 innings, and the Brewers were like, all right, this is enough. Let's put him in the bullpen and see what he can do. Because he had pitched out of the bullpen from time to time with the Nationals before he got injured. So they put him in the bullpen, and he was great for the rest of the year. 27 innings out of the Milwaukee pen, a 1.67 ERA for Joe Ross, 24% K rate, 10% walk rate, just a 5% barrel rate allowed, just a 32% hard hit rate allowed. That is a lot of soft contact that Ross was getting when he wasn't getting strikeouts. His fastball and slider, both of them played up velocity-wise and stuff-wise when he moved to the bullpen, started throwing more sliders, was getting a lot more swing and miss on that pitch than he ever got as a starter. And it was kind of the tale as old as time. Okay starting pitcher turns into good reliever when you move him to the pen in shorter stints, and his stuff plays up. And here's the good part about Joe Ross, besides the fact that he's going to cost, maximum $5 or $6 million on a 1-year deal. He's versatile. So you could sign him and say, hey, if we get some injuries, Joe Ross could be our number 5 starter. But in a perfect world, he's in the bullpen helping us there, multi-inning outings, whatever he needs to do, but could be moved back to the rotation at any time if we need some starters. That is a versatile type swingman who could really, really help you, and you could pick up on the cheap. Number 2 on this list, you may know a little bit because he did pitch for the Red Sox down the stretch this year, and that is Lucas Sims, 30-year-old right-hander who split the season between the Reds and the Red Sox this year, was dealt to Boston from Cincinnati at the trade deadline. And the Matrix also predicting just a 1-year, $4 million deal for Sims this offseason. Now, he's another guy who's had some injury concerns, missed most of 2022 with a herniated disc in his back, had to get surgery for that. But he did come back to pitch for the Reds in 2023, that season where they kind of put themselves on the map. And he was pretty good that year. And then this year, wasn't as good. It was a 4.38 ERA for Sims in 49 and a third innings, only a 23% strikeout rate, a 14% walk rate. Like it wasn't the best that you would want to see from 30-year-old Lucas Sims. That's especially because of the stuff that he possesses. He really struggled down the stretch with the Red Sox and then also went on the IL with a lat strain. So he may have been injured most of the time that he was with Boston. That's how bad he was. But he was still okay with the Reds before he went to Boston. And he's got a 132 stuff plus this year. That is just purely looking at how good your stuff is, the fastball, slider, all that good stuff. Among the free agent right-handed relief pitchers, like I'm showing the leaderboard here on the Locked On Orioles YouTube page. If you're watching, like here is Lucas Sims on that stuff plus leaderboard for the free agents this offseason. Only Clay Holmes, who we've talked about, at 135, and Jordan Romano, who we've talked about at 134, had a better stuff plus this year than Lucas Sims at 132. Like there was some disgusting stuff coming out of that Lucas Sims right arm. Now the issue is sometimes sadly, more than sometimes, he doesn't quite know where it's going. It was a pretty high walk rate this year, 14%. It was higher last year at 15.1%. He also had his strikeout rate drop by almost 5% this year, which was a little bit concerning. Now, the numbers were better with the Reds before the trade and the injury with Boston, but that it's a sweeper, 4-seam fastball cutter combination for the arsenal. It's all got insane movement, good velocity. That's why he has such the high stuff plus. And again, he doesn't get hit hard. Had an 85.4 mile per hour average exit velocity against him this year. That was the 4th lowest number for all pitchers in Major League Baseball in 2024. So like nobody's crushing Lucas Sims. He just gets in trouble because he walks so many guys. The stuff is there. The soft contact's there. That is a combination of elite relievers. A lot of elite relievers have that combination. He just needs to rein in the command. I'm not saying he needs to cut a 14% strikeout rate in half and make it 7%. But can you get it down to 11% or 12% where good relievers can hang on and pitch well? That's where we're talking. So if the Orioles can make whatever mechanical, just little tweak to rein in that command just enough, that weak contact and that pure stuff he's got can fully take off for Lucas Sims. And I think he could be one of the under-the-radar pickups of this offseason if the Orioles or some team can make that happen. But number 1 on my list is a guy who Listen, I wanted the Orioles to trade for this guy at the deadline last year when nobody was really talking about him being a trade candidate. That is 27-year-old right-hander Michael Soroka, who spent 2024 with the Chicago White Sox and is now projected for a 3-year, $24 million deal in free agency. So a guy's going to get 3 years, $24 million, not the most under the radar pitcher, but he is a little bit when I tell you kind of where he came from here. Now, he is kind of like Clay Holmes on this list, maybe a little bit like Joe Ross on this list, where teams are looking to potentially sign him as a starter. And that maybe takes the Orioles out of the running, definitely ups the price. But even if the O's wanted to do that, I would be down because I'm so intrigued by Michael Soroka. Now, formerly, Soroka was a top prospect with the Braves. He came up in 2020 very briefly. And then he came up in 2018 very briefly. And then in 2019, he was one of the best pitchers in baseball. His first full season, 29 starts, 2.68 ERA, finished second in Rookie of the Year and sixth in NL Cy Young voting that year with the Braves. But then in 2020, he tore his Achilles, kind of a freak accident coming off the mound in a game in 2020, was out for the rest of the year, causing him to miss most of 2021 because he re-injured it and had to get another surgery. Then he tore it again after that. So basically missed most of 2020, all of 21, all of 22, and spent most of 2023 in AAA, still coming back. Now, he did get back to the big leagues with the Braves to start 6 games at the end of 2023, but he was not the same pitcher. He had a 6.40 ERA. It was a guy you didn't really recognize when he came back. So the question was like, yeah, it's not arm injuries, which is good, but like, who is this guy after 3 surgeries on your Achilles in the span of 3 years? That is not something you want. So the Braves have kind of moved on. They traded him to the White Sox last offseason because the White Sox were trying to get anybody to eat innings. And the White Sox put him in the rotation because they didn't have anybody else, and he was terrible. He threw 43 2/3 innings to a 6.39 ERA in the White Sox rotation. Even that was too bad for the 2024 White Sox. And they said, you know what? We have this guy. He's a younger guy, but maybe we see something. Just throw him in the bullpen, right? We're not going to cut him loose yet. Just throw him in the bullpen, see what he can do. Well, in the bullpen, Michael Soroka was a different pitcher. In the bullpen, he threw 36 innings and posted a 2.70 ERA. And it wasn't only that, but it was the strikeout stuff that he was flashing in that bullpen. He went to the pen for Chicago and had a 39% strikeout rate in the pen. Now, a 13% walk rate was a little bit high, but 39% strikeout rate, that is absurd what he was doing in that bullpen. He ditched his sinker. That was kind of his bread and butter pitch. He was a big ground ball pitcher when he was really good and, close to winning the Cy Young. Ditched that and went to the 4-seamer, which had really good ride, became almost an unhittable pitch for Soroka. And you can kind of see it here if you're watching on Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. This is the pitch usage for Michael Soroka month by month in the 2024 season. And you can see kind of where he got moved into the bullpen was right around June when that sinker usage just crashed. It went up a little bit in July. Then he ended up getting injured. And he did miss a little bit of time, which was unfortunate because he missed 2 months, July to September, with a shoulder strain. And you're like, oh, he finally figured something out in the bullpen, right? He's ditching his sinker. You see the 4-seamer usage just spike. He's still using the slider a lot. And you're like, man, all was going well for Soroka. And he gets a shoulder injury. It's like it had all been lower body, non-arm injuries. Then he gets the arm injury. And you're like, it's done. He's done. But he comes back in September for this terrible White Sox team. And I know it was a small sample, but he was even better when he returned. Came back to pitch down the stretch. 7 1/3 innings, 2 hits, no runs, 13 strikeouts, 2 walks. Yeah, 13 strikeouts, 2 walks in 7 1/3 innings, and a 50% swing and miss rate against his slider when he returned in September. He was a even better pitcher after the shoulder. So that tells me, hey, I think the shoulder might be okay. He avoided hard contact. He's got the starter background, so the teams might, pay him to be a starter. But listen, he's 27 years old. Teams might pay him to be a starter. He might be a little more expensive than your average reliever we've talked about. As I mentioned, predicting a 3-year, $24 million deal for Soroka. But similar to Joe Ross, but with a much higher upside, if you're the Orioles, Dave Rubenstein, pay him as a number 5 starter. Because at best, maybe he can take that reliever stuff and put it back in his starting arsenal. And if that doesn't work, you've got this super intriguing 27-year-old reliever. Like, these are the ages of all the other guys we've talked about today. 30, 31, 39, 36, 35, 31, 37, 31. You're not getting a lot of relievers at age 27 that hit the market, but that is Michael Soroka, who just found maybe a new calling with the White Sox of all people in 2024. I wanted the O's to pounce the deadline. Luckily they didn't, because right after the deadline, actually, he missed those 2 months with the shoulder strain, so it wouldn't have been a lot of help and then would have become a free agent. But now is the time. He is my number one breakout under the radar. Like, this guy could be nasty. And again, he's 27, so it's not like Blake Trinan where you're getting him for 1 or 2 years, then he retires. Could be nasty for a while. And I would like the Orioles to at least kick the tires on Mr. Michael Soroka, as long as that Achilles can hold up, hopefully, for the rest of his career. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in for a bit of a longer episode. Let me know here in the comments. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. But let me know, which right-handed relievers would you like to see the Orioles get? Which guys did I leave off that you would like to get? I will give a disclaimer. Jeff Hoffman is awesome. He is not on this list for 2 reasons. One, he's projected to get like a 4-year some deal. The Orioles aren't giving that to a reliever. And the other thing is, a lot of the smoke around Hoffman is that a team is going to sign him to turn him back into a starting pitcher. Orioles could do that, but to me, he's not a reliever. To me, he's a starting pitcher at this point, because it seems like so many teams want to do that. But Jeff Hoffman's nasty, and I would love for the Orioles to get Jeff Hoffman, but I couldn't quite fit him in a category. So again, he's awesome, but just didn't put him on this list for that reason. But if there's anybody else you think I left off, let me know in the comments how you'd switch guys around, who else you'd like to see, what you'd like the Orioles to do with this bullpen this offseason. But that'll do it for today's episode. Thank you so much for tuning in. Unless we get some Orioles news, which, hey, we're getting some news. Some pitchers have signed this week, right? Frankie Montas goes off the board to the Mets. Matthew Boyd goes off the board. A couple of guys. Boyd to the Cubs. Boyd I had on my lefty wish list. Maybe some more pitchers will go. Juan Soto apparently now is getting a bunch of $600 million offers. Maybe he will speed up things. So if there's some news, we'll get to it tomorrow. But if not, we jump back in on our 2024 player season review series, talking about Dean Kramer. Like, is Dean Kramer just the perfect number 5 starter right now for the Orioles? Try to break that down on tomorrow's episode. But until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.